beyond us, we can go back to speaking about Shavuos and more importantly about Torah, our relationship with Torah. What I'd like to speak about is the written law and the oral law, why there's a need for both, the role of each of them, and our relationship with them. We understand that without the oral law, we cannot possibly understand the written law. There are so many verses that are misleading, where the oral law sets us straight and tells us that we are not to understand them the way they're written. Reading the written law on its own is not enough. Now, the oral law contains everything. Why is there a need for the written law? Why? What's the purpose of it?
Like a skeletal structure?
I go further than the skeletal structure. It's actually everything. Everything's there. It's just so concentrated and so nuanced that without the oral law, we can't figure it out, but the whole Torah is there. God gave us the whole Torah, and He gave that in the written law. The oral law teaches us what to do with it. But I want to go further, and I think this is very, very important. It is not only that all of halacha is contained in the written law. It's all the secrets. Absolutely all the secrets. They're all there. It was just presented to us in a cryptic manner. They say in the name of the Arizal. I don't know if this is true. I've never seen it, in the original, but they say in the name of the Arizal. Had the written law been written in its proper order, rather than the way it is now, which feels like stream of consciousness or something. They're going from one thing to another to another. If we're written in its proper order, everyone would know how to create human beings out of it. All the secrets of it.
What would you mean proper order? Like what would be the proper order?
In a way that it's intelligible in giving us all the secrets. In other words, it would be organized. The written law is just so disorganized. Had it been organized, we would all understand it to the way that we could use it to create human beings. Well, alone, everything else. The oral law has its levels, and there, of course, there's first you study the oral law, and then you get to the other parts of the oral law, which include all the secrets, and then you really get to understand them, and then you really, really get to understand them, and so on. And that's where it says, the Tanoim of the Mishnah were capable of reviving the dead. So when we study the written law, what do? If we study without the oral law, we're not going to get much out of it. But we still get something out of it. Something very important. Because the written law is sacred. Meaning these are the words, the letters, the spellings, chosen by the Creator to carry the whole message. They are sacred. Every letter means something. Every crown and every letter means something. Simply saying the words, you really don't know what you're talking about, does great things up. This goes for the entire written law. This entire written law, there is no part of the written law that this doesn't apply to. That means the Chumash, the prophets, the scriptures, Luzzatto alludes to this when in Derech Hashem he talks about the commandment to study Torah. He says the commandment involves two things. There are parts of Torah that is simply saying the words, and other parts of Torah where it's all about the principles. He's referring to Torah Sheniksab, Torah Shalopeh, the written in the oral law. But it is the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch Harav who actually writes this lahalacha. And he says that if you study or say any part of the written law without understanding it, you are fulfilling the commandment to study Torah because you are uttering these holy words. Not so with the oral law, where it's all about the understanding. If you're reading it and not understanding it, you are wasting your time. So for example, to recite the Tehillim, the Psalms are part of the written law. You don't even have to know what the words mean. Of course, the more you understand them, the more passionate you are. But in theory, even if you don't know what you're saying, they work.
Is the Shema Esrei included in that? Or is that, is the Shema Esrei included in that? Because I know Shema is...
Again?
Is the Shema Esrei included in, like, saying the words? Or because I know there's the concept of, like...
The Shema Esrei was put together by the Great Assembly. It's not part of the written law, the oral law. It was put together by them. Of course, there's a magic to the words, but you have to know what you're saying.
But that's different than like saying Shema.
It's prayer. You're praying. You're addressing the Creator. How do you address Him if you don't know what you're saying?
But I guess I'm just juxtaposing that to Shema, which is like directly from the Torah. But it's also
Shema. You certainly have to know what you're saying, because when you say Shema, what you're doing is declaring what it says.
Okay. But isn't that from it's from the Devarim, right?
Even though it is from the written law, you fulfill the mitzvah of Torah study by saying it when you don't know what you're talking about, but not the mitzvah of Shema.
Okay.
The mitzvah of Shema is to mean what you're saying. And you're supposed to say it in Hebrew. At least the very first part of the Shema Yisrael Shalom Keinu Shemach. This is why we definitely spend the majority of our time studying the oral law as opposed to the written law, because it's all about understanding. That's where we get to start thinking like the Torah, thinking like the Creator. Whereas in the written law, where its real meaning is beyond us, our understanding of it is very, very limited. The oral law sheds light on it, but reading the written law on its own, it's still, you're doing something. It's very interesting. The rabbis, when the Anshe Knesset, the Great Assembly, when they formalized the religion, they established that when the Torah is read, the written Torah is read, the Chumash, in public, every verse is to be translated in a way that people can understand it. We spend our time trying to understand the principles of Torah, and that's all in Torah Shalopeh, that's in the oral law. In reading from the Torah, which is a commandment already, Moshe taught us that, the Great Assembly established that we should be translating it using the Targum, the translation of Onkelos, which is all part of the oral law. They stopped translating it because most people don't understand Aramaic today. It's written in Aramaic. But really, every time they read a verse, they're supposed to have someone translating it into Aramaic.
Would that also be like if they read it in shul, or like?
That's what they were talking about.
Oh yeah.
When it's read in public in shul.
So why don't they do it in to English nowadays?
Because the Amshik Masagdol was said to do it in the Aramaic, which was part of Torah Sheba'al Peh. It was Onkelos' translation. Onkelos was a student of Rabbi Eliezer. He got the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that's his translation is Torah Sheba'al Peh. There's only one group that still does this today, and that's the Yemenites. The Yemenites actually read the Onkelos. Not only that, but the Yemenite kids are taught to read Chumash with Onkelos, and the goal is for them to know by heart. You have a lot of Yemenite kids who know all of Onkelos by heart.
What kind of insights does Onkelos talk about? Like he just goes deeper in depth with the pasukim, or Onkelos he has commentary on each pasuk, or it's just a
translate every pasuk in the whole Chumash.
But is it like a translation with the oral law?
It's the translation in the spirit of the meaning. And it's translated according to the understanding of the oral law.
Could you give an example?
A perfect example. The verse reads, "Don't cook a goat with its mother's milk." Onkelos translates it, "Don't eat meat and milk."
Okay.
All three times. There's 3 times in there. It's the same all 3. Lo techlun basar v'chalab.
Are there any books that have the Chumash, but then also have where it says it in the Gemara and
There's actually a very, it's always printed in fine print. I don't know why, but there's a commentary on the Chumash that doesn't comment. He just gives you references, all the different places in the oral law that this verse appears. It's called the Toldos Aaron. It's in every all the standard Chumash we have it.
Wow.
It's in very fine print. But he lists off wherever it is. I mentioned in the past that the Vilna Gaon made the claim that once you study and know all of the oral law, you're supposed to go and read it back in the written law, see how it's all there. To the extent that the last years of his life were spent only studying Torah Shebechsav, the written law. And he claimed everything was there. Everything, including all of mysticism, said it was all there. Some of the Talmidei HaGra students actually wrote for different parts of Torah how things are actually in the verse. But they say his last years he was just reading the Chumash and he said everything's there. Now that he knew the entire oral law, all the way through the Kabbalah, he said everything's there if you only read it carefully. Nevertheless, we have a responsibility to know the written law. We have to know Torah Shebechsav. It's not enough to know Torah Sheba'al Peh. In fact, the most literal translation of the Gemara is we are supposed to spend a third of our time studying the written law until we know all of it by heart. Now, it's generally not so practiced. I'm aware of two groups that do this. The Yemenites and the Zilbermans here. Where the kids know all of Tanakh well. In fact, they do things in order. First you learn Tanakh, then the Mishnah, then the Gemara. The question is, what happened to everyone else? What happened to everybody else? What's with us here at Yeshiva? How much of the written law is taught? Nothing. What happened to that obligation? So the one that really raises the point is already the Balei Tosfos, which is going all the way back, to the days of the Rishonim. And he says that our Gemara includes so much of the written law that you fulfill studying the Chumash and Tanakh by reading the Gemara. It says Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, includes the written and the oral. You know what it says? So it's all there. You don't have to divide your time in three. The Rambam does not follow that. The Shulchan Aruch does not follow that. But the Ramah says that is the Ashkenazi custom. Today, I'm not aware that the Sephardi Yeshivot do any different than the Ashkenazi ones. And the only exception are the Yemenites, who are in a class for themselves, and they're still teaching Chumash with the Targum, with Onkelos' translation, and the kids are memorizing it. And then there's the Zilbermans, where they just study over and over and over until they know it all by heart. You will find that Haftorah here on Shabbos, if you're ever around for that, is usually read by some kid that studied in Zilberman's, and quite often they'll have someone read unprepared, and they're fine. Because they know it all anyway. Okay, so the Ashkenazi custom otherwise is not. He said the emphasis is placed on Torah Shabbat Peh, and the explanation given is you're gonna find out about everything in the written law anyway through Torah Shabbat Peh. Okay, but even more so, the true understanding of the written law is by studying the oral law. If you just study the written law alone, who knows what it's going to turn into? The truth is that even though the Ashkenazi custom was not to spend all that much time on the written law, it became the norm for people not to know the written law. Back in Eastern Europe, because the Maskilim, the enlightened ones, they studied the written law and gave little value to the oral. Because the Haskalah did not like the oral law, because it said too many things that were not to their life, they preferred studying the written law. As a backlash, Ashkenazi Jewry where all this was taking place, shunned the study of Torah Shabbat of the written law. Well, those maskilim don't really exist anymore. And there's definitely reason for people to know Torah Shabbat like they didn't in previous generations. I would suggest, if you've got the time, to make sure that you go through not only all of Chumash, you study at one point or another all of Tanakh. It's very, very important. Listen, Torah Shabbat is all about it. It's all about Torah Shabbat. So you should know Torah Shabbat.
When you say that, do you mean like reading it straight, or the good commentaries that you draw?
Reading with a quick commentary.
Which commentary do you think would be?
Well, today the most popular is to go through the Stone Chumash and their Tanakh. They also call Tanakh.
It's green or blue? No.
The Tanakh is green. The Chumash is blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, aside from all of that, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu taught us that we are supposed to read from the Torah on every festival the pertinent places in the Chumash where the festival is mentioned. These are the first rabbinical laws, the ones made by Moshe. This is not reading so you'll know what to do. You do it, in the morning of the festival. It's a little too late to start learning the laws. Moshe Rabbeinu saw us experiencing every festival together with the Torah of the festival. It's questionable exactly who did what. It seems that Moshe also said that we are to read from the Torah on Monday and Thursday, and then it was Ezra that said Shabbos Mincha as well. Different themes of who did what, but that is the simple one. And every festival, including Rosh Chodesh, we read the appropriate Torah reading. Really, it was not just meant to be read. You're supposed to study it. If you can listen and understand carefully what was being written, that's enough. But really, we're supposed to be well versed in Torah Shabbat as well as Torah Shabbat. Both of them. Yeah. Okay.